This segment is about the orthophosphate phosphorus test, and again, if you read in your instructions, this test has various different levels as well, a low range, a mid range, and a high range. But more times than not, a lot of our volunteers use a low range, so I'll go ahead and show you that. And the equipment in the orthophosphate test is going to have a black box, and it should have a mirror in there. And that is going to be setting in the shelf kind of in the middle left hand of the box. Orthophosphate test is going to have a blue color wheel. It should be in an envelope just to kind of keep it clean and stuff like that. So you want to put this on the spindle so that the numbers are facing out to you. Close the door. It's also going to have 2 glass test tubes, and the caps on there are just for storage because these are glass, they could potentially chip, so the caps are just for storage. So just take them off, put them back in the test kit. They're not used for mixing or stirring or anything. It's going to have 1 or 2 of the square mixing bottles with numbers, markings, increments on it, and a plastic thimble. This is going to be used for shaking and agitating. So we always start out with our blank first. So rinse the square mixing bottle 3 times with deionized water. You need to fill it up to the 20 line, 20, with deionized water. So again, fill this at eye level. Make certain all the bubbles are out. And then need a little bit more in here. You want the very bottom of the water curve to be at the 20 line. So that's our bottle filled with deionized water to the 20 line. Then this is the critical part. As soon as this reagent hits the, let me get my stopwatch going here. Okay. As soon as this reagent powder hits the water, that's when our time starts. We're going to time for 7.5 minutes. We need to read the test at 8 minutes. So I'll get into that after we get our reagent in here and started to time. So I'll get this ready, get my stopwatch ready, and reagent added, stopwatch is going. So again, we're timing this for 7.5 minutes. This is our finger cap. We're going to put this in, shake and agitate until it's well dissolved. We do not want to have any sort of reagent that is sitting there in the bottom. All this needs to be dissolved as much as possible. So we just keep shaking, agitating until it is completely dissolved. And we're getting close. This one takes a little bit to dissolve. And we are there. So leave that there. Now we're going to get our test tubes ready. So we need to rinse out both of our test tubes 3 times with deionized water. And one of the test tubes we're going to fill with deionized, the other one's going to stay blank. So the empty test tube goes on the inside or the center of the black box. The other test tube we're going to fill to the very top white line with deionized water. This is what we call the comparator tube, because especially when we do our creek water testing, the creek water is going to have its own base natural color to it. Whenever we add a reagent to a liquid, we need to have that base color to start with whenever we compare the test tubes. So this is our comparator tube, filled to the top white line with deionized water, and it goes on the outside hole. And we still have about 5.5 more minutes for this to develop. So at 7.5 minutes, we are going to pour from the square mixing bottle into the empty glass tube up to the top white line. And if you over pour, please pour back and forth between the square mixing bottle and the test tube, because you don't want to pour out too much into the liquid waste and then not have enough to fill it to the top white line. So that goes on the center, the one with the reagent goes in the center hole. Then what you need to do is stand directly underneath a light, because we are reading down through the volumes of the test tube. We need a light down here, and that was the whole purpose of having the mirror in the black box. So now we need to take our readings, turning the wheel until the colors match on the wheel, and since this is our blank, there should not be anything, and it does read a 0. So that means our blank is working well, and our reagents are working well, and our equipment is working well. So we're good to go on with our creek water test. So we'll go ahead and get the creek water test started, and then we'll mess with our black box and our test tubes. So we need to rinse out our bottle 3 times with deionized water. Then we'll rinse it out 3 times with our creek water. We're going to fill the glass bottle up to the 20 line, 20, with our creek water. So you want the very bottom of the water line to be at the top of the 20 line. And we are there. Going to get my stopwatch going. It's ready. You're going to pull out a Phos version 3 powder packet. I'm going to rinse off my finger cap first with creek water on the outside. So I have that ready to go. And then add the packet. I got my stopwatch. Packet is added and the stopwatch is going. Make certain to get all that reagent in the bottle. Put the finger cap on and shake, agitate until the reagent is dissolved. This might take a few seconds or a minute. And pressure will build up, so the finger cap might come off a bit, but just keep agitating until it's dissolved. And my reagent has dissolved, so yeah, be careful with the pressure and ease up on the finger cap. Now we need to empty out our test tubes and rinse them out 3 times with deionized water. And rinse out that previous test. And we'll need to rinse them 3 times with creek water. My syringe is almost out, so I need to get some more water in there. And rinse out the test tubes 3 times with creek water. And leave 1 test tube empty. Turn this around so you can see. The second test tube, I'm going to fill up to the top white line with creek water. So you want the very bottom of the water curve to be at that top line. There we go. This one that just has creek water in it is going to go in the outside hole. Again, that's going to be our comparator tube, because creek water does have, you can even see here, creek water does have a little bit of color to it. So we have about 5.5 more minutes for this to develop. Okay, we got 30 more seconds on our time for it to develop on our first creek water test. And so just like with the blank, so I got about 15 seconds. So we'll pour from the square mixing bottle into the empty test tube. About 10 seconds. So this has been timed for 7.5. Got two, okay, we've got 7.5 minutes, so that means we're pouring up to the top white line with our sample. So this goes on the inside hole. And again, we need to stand directly underneath the light so we can get our readings. Oh, not much of a reading, but there is some orthophosphate in this test. Very, very slight color, but there is a little bit. It's probably looking like about a 3 or 4 on the wheel. So this is the low range test, so the directions say you need to divide by 150, and that will equal your milligrams per liter of orthophosphate phosphorus. So this is a result of a very low result of the test. And we do have an example of a test that is still within the low range, but it's going to show you more orthophosphate phosphorus in that test. So we will start working on that here now. So that was our first creek water test, and it was nice to have a result very low, about a 3 or 4 reading on the wheel. And so what you would need to do then is do a second creek water test. And we're not going to do that now because it takes 7.5 minutes to develop, and I've already shown you once. But what you would do is empty out your square mixing bottle, rinse that 3 times with deionized water, rinse it 3 times with creek water, fill it up to the 20 line, add your Phos version 3 powder packet, and time yourself for 7.5 minutes. And then as that is going, you would empty out your glass test tube that was on the center. You would rinse that 3 times with deionized water, rinse it 3 times with creek water, and then leave it empty because that's what you would pour into at the end of 7.5 minutes. Just a word to the wise to you. Please do not have numerous tests in the square mixing bottles timed at the exact same time, because you only have 1 black box, 1 set of glass test tubes. So you can have 2 tests going, but they cannot be starting timed at the exact same time. So have at least 2.5 or 3 minutes in between different testings, whether it's the blank in the first creek water test or the first creek water test and the second creek water test, because you do need time to rinse out your test tubes and have enough time in order to make your readings. Okay, what I have for you here, I'll put this down on the table because I have blue gloves on, and maybe you can see the blueness here. This is another creek water test that we went out and got today so that we could actually show you, hopefully you can see here, that there is a little bit of blue tinge to this sample, and so there definitely is orthophosphate phosphorus in this sample. So we will actually go ahead and pour this into our already rinsed out second glass test tube and see how much reading this one results in. So we're pouring this up to the top white line because it's been our 7.5 minutes. And we're going to put this in the inner slot. Again, stand underneath the light and get a reading. And as you can already tell from the square mixing bottle, this one already had a tinge blue to it, so this one's going to have a higher reading than 3, most certainly. This is having a reading of about 23. So quite a bit more, but it's still within the low range test. So you just take 23, divide it by 150, and that would equal your milligrams per liter of orthophosphate phosphorus for this test.